The next thing I knew, my car was shooting through the air, 80 miles an hour, spinning and flipping at the same time. What was gonna happen? Am I gonna be meeting my maker today? What? This is a true story of something that happened to me a few years ago, and I wanted to share the whole thing with you. It all started the afternoon of July 6th, 1997. My beautiful car was sitting out in the driveway, broken. It was an amazing 1982 Honda Civic wagon, 4-door. I can't even say that without laughing. It was so weak, I could bring it to top speeds of maybe 50 miles an hour if I was going downhill, you know? It was one of those kind of cars. Well, mine was broken down, so I had to go ask my mom if I could borrow her car to drive about 15 minutes to the country town. It was through a roller coaster of hills and roads, but my mom had a 1992 Nissan Sentra V6 power steering, amazing car to me. I was a classic 16-year-old wanting his driver's license and got it. Actually, I started driving when I was like 6 or 7 years old. That's a story for a different day. So I borrowed my mom's car. I was maybe 5 minutes away from home, and literally this road reminded me of a roller coaster. There were some of the dips and the hills, and if you drove them just right, it would make your stomach feel like it went up in your throat. It was an amazing ride, and I knew how to drive it just right. The time was about 7:20 in the evening, and I was just cresting one of these hills on that roller coaster road, and my memory gets a little bit faded here. You'll understand why here in a minute. But according to the skid marks, I had skidded around something, probably a deer at this time, and I was driving about 80 miles an hour over this roller coaster road, and I was having the time of my life. After I swerved around the deer, I tried to get back in my lane and overcorrected, got in the ditch as I'm starting to come down the hill, and the ditch flipped me up, and my car started going, spinning and going upside down this hill. It was an amazing ride. This was quite literally the ride of my life. Heaven and hell were both laying before me. Satan was desiring fresh blood, but Jesus was saying, not quite yet. My car came to rest upside down, the wrong direction, at the bottom of the hill. Now, I was wearing my seatbelt, so quick little plug for anyone who doesn't wear their seatbelt, put it on. Well, it takes a lot to keep me down, and I'm not one to rest much, so I decided immediately to get out of the car and just kind of walk it off. You know, it's like those dads, their son's playing soccer, he falls and breaks his leg, and the dad says, "Come on, son, just walk it off." I thought maybe I could walk this one off too. Well, I was walking around the car in a bloody stupor, trying to figure out what to do next. I was probably trying to figure out how I was going to flip this thing over, or how I was going to convince my mom that somehow this wasn't my fault. Well, a woman who lived there saw me walking around and thought, this is definitely not right, so she immediately called 911. The police and fire arrived there just a couple minutes later, and now I'm thinking, what? I went through all this, I messed up my mom's car, and now the police are getting involved. When they saw the blood coming from my head and the car, the condition, they knew something was not right. So they didn't even talk about a ticket or fines or anything like that. At least not at this time. That's another story for another day. So they had me sit down until they could get more medical help. They immediately radioed for Lifeline to come so that they could rush me to the hospital as quickly as possible. I'd like to say it was a fun ride, but honestly, they had me strapped to this bed thing, couldn't even see out the windows, and I can't remember any of it. I can honestly remember at the hospital being loaded into this tube and having some dude bang on it with a hammer. It was terrible. But in the end, they decided I had something messed up in my brain, so they decided to cut it open and start surgery. So around 11:30 that night, I was wheeled into a surgery room, and my skilled surgeon, he literally cut open my brain and took out a blood clot and then sewed me back up. My mother got a call on the phone where they said, "We have your son here in the hospital. He's in for emergency brain surgery. We don't think he's going to make it. So please rush down here. What? What? You don't say that to anybody, let alone a mother. Thankfully, her parents lived next door and they rushed her into the hospital. So here I was, 16 years old. I had this really awesome scar going into my junior year of high school, but I could only test at a 4th grade comprehension level. But don't worry, by the grace of God, I can easily pass a 6th grade comprehension level now. The moral of the story is that God literally protected my life. At this point, I knew who God was, but I had no relationship with him. I did stuff for him, but I did not know God. I'll go through more of that in a different story, but at this point in my life, I was not saved. I was not heading to heaven. And then later, in a later story, I'll tell you about when the DA got involved and decided to make this whole case terrible. Well, if you liked my story at all, I want to encourage you to like, comment, subscribe. I'm starting this as a new podcast where I'm telling stories from the Bible of events that happened, telling stories from my life. So let me know what you think. And click the video right up here if you want to hear my next story.